Now we come to the chapter 2. The title of the chapter 2 is The Birth of Buddhism. That means the origin of Buddhism. Why and how did the Buddhism happen or arise in India? A critical response to the binary opposition between two world views. The Buddhism is regarded as a critical response to a critical response. A critical means to have criticism. Buddhism criticize two binary opposition view of the world. And it is a kind of response to. Response to means at the beginning, there were two world views which are against each other. And later on, Buddhism arose as a critical response to these two world views. These two world views are against each other. Binary means dualistic opposition. Each one of these two world views is against each other. The Buddha often refers to the binary opposition between two world views and sees his own teaching as one that sets itself equally aloof from both of them. The Buddha often refers to, here we use the present tense, not the past tense. Of course, we can also use the past tense. However, the present tense is often used when we illustrate a story or a truth. Then we use the present tense to make it simple. The Buddha often refers to the binary opposition between two world views. Often refers to, it means that when the Buddha gave teachings, he always refers to two world views and then gave his opinions to criticize these two world views and see his own teaching as the one that sets itself equally aloof. Sets equally aloof means equally apart from both of them. The Buddha's view doesn't follow any one of these two world views, but sets itself equally aloof. How can the Buddha set his teachings equally aloof from these two world views? This is because the Buddha discovered the principle of dependent arising. And what is the dependent arising means? The dependent arising in Pali is called Paticca Samuppada. Paticca Samuppada means dependent arising. It says when this is, that is, from the arising of this comes the arising of that. When this isn't, that isn't. from the cessation of this comes the cessation of that. This is so-called the Paticca Samuppada. This and that refers to the factor of the 12 means of causation, which the Buddha used to explain our birth and death, from the past to the present and to the future. In total, there are 12 factors. These 12 factors are linked to each other. The previous one is regarded as the cause, and the succeeding one is regarded as the effect. The principle of cause and the effect. The Buddha said, when this is, that is. For example, when there is ignorance, there will be the volitional formation. And because there is volitional formation, there will be the linking consciousness, and so on. When this is, that is. When this is, this refers to the preceding factor, and that refers to the succeeding factor. When this is, that is. From the arising of this comes the arising of that. For example, from the arising of ignorance comes the arising of volitional formation, and so on. From the cessation of this comes the cessation of that. Cessation means ending. For example, from the ending, from the cessation of ignorance comes the cessation or ending of volitional formation. Buddha used these 12 things of causation to explain samsara. Samsara means rebirth again and again. Of course, it is better to use re-becoming, not to use rebirth. Re-becoming means in each factor, there are in total 5 aggregates. In the factor of ignorance, there are 5 aggregates. The so-called Rupa, Vedana, Sanchita, Samkhara, and Vijnana. There are 5 aggregates of our body and the mind in each of the 12 factors. The Buddha used this and that. This and that is singular form. This is singular form. That is also singular form. This refers to the preceding and the succeeding factor in the 12 things of causation. However, we have to remember that in this or that, there are always 5 aggregates or panchakanda in each factor. The Buddha discovered that samsara, or even everything of the world, is interdependently originated. We cannot go to the extreme to say being or existence, and we also cannot go to the another extreme of non-being or non-existence. So the Buddha's teaching is always aloof from these two binary opposition of world views. Thus, addressing Katyana, the Buddha says, Katyana is one of the 10 greatest disciples of the Buddha. He was famous for his expounding of the Dharma or discussion about the Dharma. The Buddha told Katyana, this word, Katyana, for the most part, depends upon a duality, upon the notion of existence and the notion of non-existent. For the most part, is the majority of people believe that our world is always existing, or our world is not existent. This world depends on a duality. The most part, the majority people believe that this world depends on a duality. This world doesn't mean the external world. This world here means our existence, the existence of our human being, which includes the body and the mind. And in total, we may divide into 5 aggregates. The aggregates of physical body, the aggregate of different feelings or sensation, the aggregate of thinking, the aggregates of volition, and the aggregates of consciousness. This word refers to our human being, which consists of body and the mind, or body and the consciousness. And most people have the duality views of our human being. One is the notion of existence, and the other is the notion of non-existent. These two notions are against each other. They oppose to each other. But for one who sees the origin of the world as it really is, with correct wisdom, there is no notion of non-existent in regard to the world. But for Any person who sees the origin of the world as it really is with correct wisdom. Correct wisdom comes from a peaceful mind. And a peaceful mind is the result of practicing samadhi or concentration. Concentration of mind comes from the observance of precept. We call the Siddha, Samadhi, and the Vipassana. From these three learnings comes from the correct wisdom. And the correct wisdom in the five Nikaya or the four agamas refers to the understanding of dependent arising. The understanding of dependent arising. Our human being is not the creation of an almighty God or a result of external factors, but it is out of our past karma that we have present life. And out of present karma, there will be our future life. This is the principle of dependent arising. The Buddha says, for one who sees the origin of the world as it really is, means the true origin or the true origin of the world with correct wisdom. There is no notion of non-existence in regard to the world. For example, if we seize the origin of volitional formation, the second factor of the 12 links of causation, the arising of the volitional formation comes from the arising of the first factor, that is ignorance. If we can see the volitional formation comes from ignorance, then we will have no notion of non-existence. And in the same consequence, for one who sees the cessation of the world as it really is, with correct wisdom, there is no notion of existence in regard to the world. In the same case, if one who has the correct wisdom, who has the insight, which comes from samadhi and siddha, then this person can see the real cessation of the world, the real cessation of the world. For example, when one can understand that the ignorance can be erased or can be ended by wisdom, when one has wisdom, then one will not have ignorance. In this case, one will have no notion of existence of the ignorance or exists kajana. This is one extreme, or does not exist. This is the second extreme without real interest. Either of these extremes, the Tathagata teaches the Dharma by the middle. As we say, the principle of Paticca when this is, that is, from the origin of this comes the origin of that. When this isn't, that isn't. From the cessation of this comes from the cessation of that. If we understand that the world or our life is like this way, is only the phenomena of dependent arising, then we will not go to neither the viewpoint of existence nor non-existent. And our world is only as such as thus when there is causes or condition, then they will have result. In this principle or theory of dependent arising, then we will have some understanding of the so-called conditionality arising and the passing away. So the Buddha says, the Tathagata teaches the Dharma by the middle. What does Tathagata mean? Tathagata is composed of two Pali words. One is Tatha, T-A-T-H-A. Tatha means this or such. Agata means comes. When we put together these two words, that we pronounce as Tathagata, which means thus comes. Thus comes. It means that the Buddha has come to Tata, the one who has come to Tata, the one who has understood Tata. The Tata is beyond our speech and beyond our imagination. It can only be perceived by a peaceful mind. That means that Tata, the Buddha, has realized the principle of dependent arising. That this is called Tata. Because of this, that is. Because of that, this is. Because of the cessation of this comes the cessation of that. In short, we call it Tata. Tata is the truth of the world or the truth of our life. It is, in fact, against these two worldviews that Buddhists polemics are continually directed, and it is by demolishing them that Buddhism seeks to construct its own view of the world. In fact, the Buddhist polemics are continually directed against these two world views. Polemics means a piece of writing to attack another's views or to defend one's views. This is the meaning of polemics. It means that the Buddhist different theories are continually directed against these two world views. We can easily find this fact from different suttas or sastras. Usually, we can find that at the beginning, the Buddha mentioned these two binary oppositions worldviews. And then the Buddha explains his view, and his view is a direct response or critical response to these two worldviews. And it is by demolishing them. By demolishing them means by refuting these two worldviews that Buddhism seeks to construct to build its own view of the world. This should explain why most Buddhist teachings are presented in such a way as to unfold themselves or to follow as a necessary corollary from the criticism of the two theoretical views of existence and non-existence. It means that the Buddhism views its own view of the world by demolishing the binary opposition of the two world views. So we can easily find that the Buddhist teachings are presented to unfold themselves. Unfold means to present the Buddhist teachings, the Buddhist different theories in this way, or to follow as a necessary corollary from a criticism of the two theoretical views of existence and non-existence. At the beginning, the Buddha criticized these two world views, and then as a result, it comes naturally the Buddha's right view. This particular context is sometimes clearly stated and sometimes taken for granted. It means that in some Buddhist suttas, the Buddha clearly mentioned his views as against the two worldviews of existence and non-existent. And in some suttas, the Buddha didn't mention the two worldviews of existence and non-existent. And directly explained his view, he didn't mention these two contradictory world views. It is within the framework of the Buddhist critique of these two worldviews, therefore, that we need to understand not only the birth of Buddhism, but also the significance of its basic. If we want to understand how did Buddhism arise in India, and what is the significant doctrines of Buddhism, then we have to understand that Buddhism is a critical response to the binary opposition of the two world views of the existence and the non-existent. This is very important. If we want to understand the birth of Buddhism and the basic teachings of Buddhism, these two theoretical views of existent and non-existent, it may be noted here, are sometimes presented as the view of being, bhavaditti, and the view of non-being, vibhavaditti. But more often as eternalism, sasatavada, and annihilationism, uchettavada, respectively. These two worldviews of existent and non-resistant are regarded as theoretical. Why? Why the author used the terms of theoretical views? It means that these two views of existence and the non-existence of the world are not the result of true wisdom. They are only the products of speculation, only the result of imagination. To the most, they can be called theoretical views. They are not the true fact of the world. They are not the result of the practice of Sila, Samadhi, and the insight. They are not the result of true wisdom. Sometimes presented as the view of being, bhava ditti. Bhava means being or existence. Ditti means view. The view of being is called bhava ditti in Pali. And the view of non-being in Pali is called vibhava, vibhava ditti. Vibhava ditti, the view of non-being. But more often, as eternalism, sasatavada, and annihilationism, uchettavada. These two terms are always mentioned in this book. Respectively means that the view of being is more often presented as eternalism, and the view of non-being is more often mentioned by annihilationism. Bhava ditti is more often used as sasatavada, and the view of non-being is more often used as Uchitta Vata. What exactly does Buddhism mean by the two views? More importantly, why does it see itself as critical response to their binary opposition? The contents of these chapters center on these two points. The first point is, how does Buddhism describe these two views? And more importantly, why Buddhism sees itself as a critical response to their binary opposition. For this purpose, we need to examine, at least in pale outline, the religious and the philosophical background against which Buddhism rose. For this purpose, we have to examine, we have to make a research, or we have to have a simple survey in pale outline. In pale outline means in the most simple outline. What is the religious and the philosophical background against which Buddhism arose? The prevailing mood of the time is in fact very well reflected in the Buddhist discourses themselves. As we can find clearly in Nikayas or Agama, or even the Mahayana Buddhist sutras, there are always the discussion of these two binary world views. The very first discourse in the entire Sutta Pitaka in the Pali Canon, knowing as the old impressionate views, is an operation from the Buddhist perspective of some 62 religious and philosophical views, which are said to represent all possible theoretical speculations on the nature of the self and the world. Most of the Buddhist suttas mention about these two binary opposition of the worldview. And also we can find in the fourth sutta, the very first discourse. Discourse can be said of scripture or the sutta in Pali. The very first sutta in the entire Sutta Pitaka of the Pali Canon. Pali Canon is the canon of the Theravadan Buddhism. Sutta Pitaka. Pitaka means basket. There are 3 baskets or Pitakas in Pali Canon. The second one is called Sutta Pitaka. The first one is called Vinaya Pitaka. The second one is Sutta Pitaka, and the third one is the Sastra. The Sastra Pitaka. Sastra Pitaka means the basket of commentaries. The very first discourse in the entire Sutta Pitaka of the Pali Canon, knowing as the old impression net of views. The old impression means all inclusive. All the views can be found in this sutta, the old impression net. Net is used as a simile of fishing net, which can catch all the fishes, no matter the fishes are large fish, big fish, or small fish. All fishes can be caught by this net, by this all embracing net. It means that all different views can be found in this sutta. Actually, that this sutta, the old impression net of views, is an oppressor. Oppressor means evaluation, examination. From the Buddhist view, Psalm 62 religious and philosophical views. Some are religious views and some are philosophical views, which are said to represent all possible theoretical speculation. Theoretical speculation, as I mentioned, it is not the discovery of true wisdom by means of practice, Shida, Samadhi, and Vipassana, but it is only out of people's imagination or speculation, theoretical speculation. It means that they only use their brain to think about the nature of the self, the nature of the world. Here, the self doesn't mean myself, yourself, or himself, herself. It doesn't mean that. The self here refers to the true and everlasting entity. The true and the everlasting entity is the meaning of self. Self is called Atta in Pali and Atma in Sanskrit. The nature of the self, or the nature of the Atta and the world, in total, there are 62 religious and philosophical views on the nature of the self and the world. And these 62 views are called theoretical speculation, not the discovery of true wisdom. This sutra is called Brahmajala Sutra. Brahmajala Sutra. And of course, there are 5 titles of this sutra. The Buddha's attendant Ananda asked the Buddha how to call this discourse. And the Buddha mentioned in total 5 titles of this sutta. And now we want to briefly mention the contents of this sutta. This sutta can be divided into 3 parts. 3 parts. The first part mentioned about the Buddhist discourse that there are actually true practitioners and there are arahant, or there are truly enlightened persons. This enlightened person practice three kinds of shilas. The very beginning shila, and the medium shila, and the maha shilas. It means that they practice the basic precept and the intermediate precepts and the most complicated or the most difficult precepts. And then they practice samadhi and vipassana, and they become enlightened. This is the content of the first part. Then, in the second part, the Buddha answered the questions of his disciples about other religious and philosophical views. The second part discusses about 18 views of the past, 18 kinds of views in regard to the past. And we can easily classify them as the so-called Sasatavada and the Uchetavada. And in the third part, the Buddha explains there are 44 views about the future, and also the 5 beliefs on attainable nibbana in the present life. What are the 5 beliefs on the attainable nibbana in this present life? For example, some people believe that the satisfaction of our sensual desires is the nibbana. And some other people believe the first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, and the fourth jhana are the attainable nibbana right now in this present life. In total, there are 62 religious and philosophical views. They can represent all the possible theoretical views of the nature of the self and the world in Buddha's time. And this is the content of the fourth sutta in the Sutta Pitaka. And it means that this is the most important sutta, the compile of the Pali Canon consider that this sutta is the most important one. So he put on the very first of the Sutta Pitaka. And of course, there is similar sutra in Chinese canon. Chinese canon are translated from the Sanskrit canon. In Chinese Buddhism, we can also find very similar sutra. It also mentions 62 religious and philosophical views. This is the only discourse to which the Buddha himself has given several titles, among which one is called the Incomparable Victory in the battle against their radical views. Ananda asked the Buddha how to call this sutta. Then the Buddha answered, call this sutta as Atthajala Sutta. Atta, A-T-T-H-A, J-A-L-A, Atta, A-T-T-H-A. Atta Jara. Jara means net. Atta means essence. Therefore, Atta Jara means net of essence. It means that this sutras collects the most important different views in Buddha's time. So it is called Atthajala Sutta. The second title is called Dhammajala Sutta. Dhamma, D-H-A-M-M-A-J-A-L-A. J-A-A is long pronunciation. Dhammajala Sutta. Dhamma here means a teaching. So this is a net of teaching. This sutra is net of teaching. It means that this sutras contains the Buddha's teachings and also the teachings of 62 philosophers or religious teachers. And the third title, the Buddha said, call this the Brahmajala Sutta. The most popular title is Brahmajala. B-R-A-H-M-A-J-A-L-A. Brahma. A Brahmajala. And the Brahma here means wisdom or knowledge. Net of wisdom or knowledge. Because this sutta includes all the teachings of different philosophers and religious teachers. The fourth title is called Ditti Jala Sutta. Ditti, D-I-T-T-H-I. D-I-T-T-H-I, Jara. Ditti Jara Sutta. Ditti means views. Therefore, Ditti Jara means net of views, net of different views. And the last title, the Buddha says, call this Anuttara Sangama Vijaya Sutta. Anuttara, A-N-U-T-T-R-A. Anuttara, A-N-U-T-T-R-A. Uttara. Uttara means top or means the north. Anuttara means the top one, which is the highest, unparalleled. Sangama means a group. Vijaya, V-I-J-A-Y-A, V-I-J-A-Y-A. Vijaya means victory. Therefore, Anuttara Sangama Vijaya means incomparable victory in battle, in fighting. It is said, the incomparable victory in the battle against theoretical views. In total, there are 5 titles. And here one is called the incomparable victory in the battle against theoretical views. The author mentioned this title only because he wants to stress the importance of this sutra. This sutra is the incomparable victory in fighting against theoretical views. Because in this sutta, the Buddha mentions his view and he defeats the 62 theoretical views of other philosophers and religious teachers. And this is the most important thing to mention. The Buddhism arose from the background of the 2 binary opposition of world views, and the Buddhism is a critical response to the existing 2 world views. All these theoretical views, despite their wide variety, can be divided into 3 groups. The first group includes religious beliefs. The second, materialist theories that arose in direct opposition to religion. And the third, many forms of skepticism that arose as a reaction against both religious beliefs and materialist theories. All these 62 theoretical views, they are very complicated. However, we can classify these 62 theoretical views into 3 groups. The first group includes religious beliefs, different religious beliefs. In Buddha's time, it is the Brahmanism, which is the result of the 4 Vedas and other religions, other religious beliefs against Brahmanism. And the second category is material theories. Of course, material theories are not religious beliefs because materialist theories don't accept the soul or the spirit or the Brahma or the creator. They believe that the world is nothing but materials. They arose in direct opposition to the first group of religious beliefs. And the third group is called many forms of skepticism that arose as a reaction against both religious beliefs and materialist theories. Here we have the terms of skepticism, and we have to bear in mind that the definition of skepticism in the background of India philosophy is different from that of the Western philosophy. In the Western philosophy, skepticism means a revolutionary views against the existing religious beliefs or the world views. However, in the Brahmajala Sutta, or in the very first discourse of the Sutta Pitaka, the Buddha used the term of skepticism means to those teachers who had elusive views about the world. Elusive, E-L-U-S-I-V-E, elusive views about the world. Just like an ear, E-E-R, just like an ear. An ear is slippery, and it is very hard to grasp an ear. So it is very hard to understand the exact views of some philosophers. Those are called the skepticism. The third group is skepticism. Skepticism arose against the first two groups. As to religion, there were two main movements. One is Brahmanism, and the other Shamanism. Okay. Now we want to explain what is the meaning of these three groups. The first group is religious belief. Among the religious beliefs, there are two movements. The traditional one is called Brahmanism, and the new movement, revolutionary movement, is called Shamanism. Shamanism means the people who became homeless as practitioners or as ascetics. They are not householder. And the Brahmanism is the householder practitioners. Shamanism is the homeless practitionerism. Among the Shamanism is Buddhism. Buddhism is one of the Shamanism. Brahmanism was a linear development of the ancient Vedic thought. It embraced both traditional religious views as well as idealistic doctrines confined to a few. The first movement is Brahmanism. Linear development means direct descendants of Brahmanism developed from the ancient Vedic thought. The ancient Vedic thought is contained in the so-called four Vedas. And the four Vedas discuss about the chanting or the prayer or the worship to the creator Brahma. And in about the 5th century of Buddha's before Common Era, or in the Buddha's time, the 4 Vedas were developed into Upanishad, and from Upanishad, the Brahmanism developed. Therefore, Brahmanism came from Upanishad, and the Upanishad came from the 4 Vedas. Brahmanism embraced both traditional religious views. Traditional religious views refer to the views in the 4 Vedas. The 4 Vedas discuss about the ceremony, the ritual, the worship, the chanting of mantra, to have the grace of the creator Brahma in order to attain Nibbana. As well as elitist doctrines confined to a few. Elitist doctrines refer to the Upanishad. As I will say at the very beginning, there were 4 Vedas, and then Upanishad, Upanishad, where Upanishad arose, developed directly from the 4 Vedas, and at last from the Upanishad came the Brahmanism. So Brahmanism has 2 main contents. The first one is traditional religious views in the 4 Vedas. The second one is the elitist doctrines confined to a few, which is the Upanishad. The Upanishad has some kind of philosophy, discussion about the creation or the theory of the world and all human beings and all animals and so on. Shamanism, on the other hand, embraces a broader spectrum of religious teachings and practices, and they all seem to have origin either in isolation from or in direct opposition to Buddhism. The second religious movement is called Shamanism. The Shamanism is the homeless practitioner. Embrace a broader spectrum. It means that Shamanism is much broader in scope. Broader spectrum of religious teaching and practices. And they seem to have origin. Why did Shamanism arise? There are 2 reasons. The first reason is in isolation from Brahmanism, in isolation from Brahmanism means that Shamanism tried to evolve from Brahmanism and didn't have any connection with Brahmanism. And the second group is directly against Brahmanism. In Brahmanism, the trend is more towards theism monism, and orthodoxy. In Shamanism, it was more towards non-theism, pluralism, and heterodoxy. The trend in Brahmanism is theism. Theism means belief in a creator God. Monism, it means that all beings, all things come from a single source. This is called monism. And orthodoxy. Orthodoxy means that Brahmanism is the major trend, is the most popular tradition, is the old one. So it is called orthodoxy. On the contrary, the trend of shamanism is non-theism. Non-theism can be also called atheism, A-T-H-E-I-S-M. A means none. Non-theism, that means doesn't believe in a creator God. This is non-theism or atheism. Pluralism means that there are more than two sources or origins of all beings and all things. There are more than two origins or sources. For example, the first origin is material, and then the second one is spiritual. Material source and the spiritual source. This is called pluralism. And of course, we may have as many as 25 sources, as in the school of Shankar. Shankar is a very important school of philosophy, which believes that there are 25 origins or sources of all beings and existence. And all these 25 came from two principles. One is the material principle, and the other one is the spiritual principle. Heterodox is regarded as a new one or a wrong view against the orthodox. In this sentence, we have discussed about the first group of the background which Buddhism arose, that is the religious belief. There are two main movements. One is Brahmanism, and the second one is Shamanism. There was, however, one basic idea which was commonly accepted by all religions belonging to both Brahmanism and Shamanism. Of course, we can conclude that both Brahmanism and Shamanism have one basic idea. This basic idea is presented in the Buddhist discourses is as follows. The self is one thing, and the body another. Anam Jiva, Anam Sarida. No matter whether they are Brahmanism or Shamanism, they all have one basic idea. in Buddhist discourses call them. The self is one thing, and the body another. And the self here doesn't mean myself, yourself, his self, himself, or herself, or ourself, their self. No, it doesn't mean that. The self here means the true and the everlasting identity, or we can call it soul. The soul is regarded as separate from the body. Therefore, it is said here, the self is one thing, and the body another. Anam means another or different. Anam jivan. Jivan means the soul or the self or the other. Anam sarinam. Sarinam means physical body. The soul is different and the body is different. It means they are dualistic. This view assumes a duality between two basic principles, one spiritual and the other material. A permanent metaphysical self on the one hand, and the temporary physical body on the other. This view, the view of the self, is different from body. This view assumes a duality. A duality means two oppositions between two basic principles. Principle means the base from which all things develop or are produced. The first principle is spiritual principle. A spiritual principle is metaphysical principle. And the other is material. Material is physical principle. Material or physical principle refers to those we can sense by means of our eyes or ears or nose or tongues or our body. We can sense them, we can see them or hear them. A permanent metaphysical self means the spiritual. The second principle is the material or our body. Our body is temporary physical body. A temporary means that we live only for a certain period of time. For example, we may live for 50 years or 60 years or 70 years or 80 years or even 100 years. However, it is only temporary. The existence of physical body is temporary. But the soul is permanent existence. Spirit is metaphysical self. And the temporary physical body is not ourself because it is not the true and the everlasting existence. Accordingly, one's true essence is to be found not in the perishable physical body, but in the permanent metaphysical body. As a result, the true ourselves, or the true essence of human beings, or even all the animals, or all the sentient beings, the true essence is not the physical body, because physical body is temporary and perishable. Someday the physical body will decompose, and the true essence of the sentient beings can be only found in the true and the everlasting existence, or the permanent metaphysical self. Our soul, or our spirit, or our true essence will not end or perish, accompanying our body. Our soul is beyond, is separate from our body. Therefore, even when our body decomposes, our soul will last forever. Hence, this view came to be described in the Buddhist discourses as eternalism, because the true essence is the soul, or the spirit, Sasattavada, or the eternalist theory of the self. The self here means the true and the everlasting existence. Usually we call it the soul, or Atta Ipari. Let us call it the theory of the metaphysical self. The metaphysical self, self is the identity, or the true identity, the true essence of sentient being. It is above physical. Metaphysical means above physical. Physical existence will perish one day, but metaphysical existence will not perish, accompanying the physical body, while noting at the same time that all religions and philosophies, both past and present, that subscribe to it are, from the Buddhist perspective, different versions of eternalism. We have to pay attention that all religions and philosophies, of course here, all religions means the other religions except Buddhism, because Buddhism is not a kind of eternalism, because Buddhism is the view of dependent arising, paticcasamuppada. So Buddhism doesn't belong to Sasattavada, doesn't belong to eternalism, because Buddhism sets itself equally aloof from Sasattavada and Uchettavada. Therefore, we have to bear in mind that all religions here don't include Buddhism. Buddhism is the only exception. Besides Buddhism, other religions, and philosophies of the religious belief, both past and present, that subscribe to it. Subscribes to it means support it from the Buddhist perspective. Different versions of eternalism. The theoretical view of annihilationism arose in direct opposition to all religions. The theoretical of Sattavada happened in direct opposition to the Sattavada. Excuse me, it is Uchittavada. Uchittavada means the theoretical view of annihilationism, or we may call it nihilism, arose in direct opposition against all religions. It took its standpoint or position. It took its position on the epistemological ground. The sense perception was the only valid means of knowledge, and therefore it questioned the validity of theological and metaphysical theories which did not come within the ambit of sense experience. The other extreme is nihilism. It has its stand on the epistemological. We can find that the eternalism or the Sattavada have their stand on the ontological ground. Ontological ground means to have the ground of the source or origin of all things. So eternalism took its stand on the ontological ground, but annihilationism took its stand on the epistemological ground. Epistemology means the science or the knowledge on the validity of our understanding. We have the explanation here. Sense perception was the only valid means of knowledge. Sense perception means the sensation by our sense organs, or the sensations, or the feelings, or the understanding of our sense organs was the only valid means of knowledge. If we cannot perceive, if what cannot be perceived by our sense organs, then it is not true. It is not a valid means of knowledge. We have to pass on our sense organs if we want to have the true or the valid knowledge. This is the standpoint of the epistemological philosophy. They only believe in sensation, in our possession of sense organ. and therefore it questions the validity of theological and metaphysical theories which did not come within the ambit of sense experience. As a result, it questions that the theological theories and the metaphysical theories are not true, are not valid, because the theology comes from the belief in an unknown creator God. And metaphysics believes that there is a spirit or there is a soul above our physical body. But the annihilationism doesn't believe the validity or the truth of theological and metaphysical theories, because they are not within the scope of our sensation. We cannot sense them. We cannot sense the God. We cannot sense the spirit. They are beyond our sensation. They are beyond our perception. They are only the result of speculation. They are not within the scope of our experience. Therefore, they arose against the so-called Sasatvada, annihilationism. That means when our physical body decomposes, then our soul, then our existence ends. There is no more existence of ourself, because they believe ourself is the physical body. When the physical body dies, then there will be no existence of ourself. These two are contradictory viewpoints against each other. Okay, this is the end of tonight's talk. Is there any question from you? What? Any comment from you?
Okay, I have one question. From the very beginning, that authors say two world views. What is the authors mean? World. World is mean the five aggregate, the world of five aggregate, all the exist the world that we live.
Word, as I say before, refers to the five aggregates or our sentient beings. Our sentient beings is called word in the four agamas or the five nikayas. In early Buddhism, the word refers to the sentient beings, the body, and the sensation, perception, volitional formation, and the consciousness, the five aggregates.
Thank you, sir.